Hello, and welcome to the Objective Health Show. I am your host today, Erica, and joining me in our virtual studio is Doug, Elliot, Tiffany, and Damien in the background.
Hello.
Hello.
So today we're going to talk about gene editing or gene tech or GMO 2.0. There's a lot of different names for this type of technology that's basically been in the works probably for a lot longer than all of us are aware of, but at least since 2015. And it's getting significant attention because it is not only moving from plants, but to animals and even humans.
Mm.
So it's kind of like letting a genie out of the bottle. Of course, there's a lot in science that has been written about it being this great revolutionary technology that's going to change the world and offer benefits, but there's also some serious concerns. So for those who don't know what genetic editing is, or sometimes referred to as CRISPR-Cas9 or just CRISPR technology, it's basically was developed in 2013, and then in 2015 one of the geneticists that created it came out. Her name is Jennifer Doudna, and she presented what is known as this CRISPR-Cas9 tech. And basically it's an acronym for clustered regularly interspaced short palindromic repeats.
Whatever that means.
And it's basically a gene editing platform using bacterially driven proteins, and that's where the Cas9 portion of that whole saying is. So it's basically used to target and break down DNA, and they claim that it's precise in snipping out unwanted elements.
So this differs from like the traditional GMO type editing, like when we think of somebody or scientists engineering a tomato by inserting something from a different plant or an animal into it to keep the tomato from turning brown or whatever. So the CRISPR is different from that, right? And that they just insert or delete genes from whatever being or entity that they're fiddling with versus introducing new material from a different species?
Yeah, that's why they're calling it GMO 2.0, because they're saying it's safer and more precise. And therein is the rub. We do have a short little video for our viewers that may explain it better than I'm not a geneticist, a biologist, nor a chemist. So you want to play that video, Damien, so our viewers can get an idea of just a small idea of what this technology is?
Yep.
So CRISPR is basically a group of molecules that can edit DNA. You can basically fine-tune them to just go after any piece of DNA you want. They can cut that DNA, and then you can actually insert a different piece of DNA in its place. So this could allow you, for example, to fix a defective gene. If somebody has cystic fibrosis, for example, in theory, you could use CRISPR to repair the gene that's faulty in them, and then they would not suffer from cystic fibrosis any longer. And also against things like cancer, because you can actually take people's own immune cells and edit their genes so that they can recognize and attack cancer cells. It's different from how GMOs are often created, where you're taking an existing gene from another species and you're inserting it into another species. In this case, you can just say, you know, this particular piece of DNA, I don't like it so much, I just want to change it a little bit, and you can make that precise change. And CRISPR actually lets you make many, many, many different changes to an organism's DNA, so you can create a whole a whole suite of changes and potentially radically change that organism.
Well, that sounds
so I'd say
nice.
that
No?
It sounds so sanitary.
Yeah. Very simple. You just take out the part you don't like. I don't like this gene. I think I'm going to replace it with something else.
My question is, how do they know so well what these individual alleles or whatever the smallest portion of a gene is? How do they even know with such certainty of what they are and where they are and how to find them and etc.?
I think that's one of the big issues with this, because they're still discovering all that kind of stuff, and I mean, I've read all kinds of different stuff about they're learning this and they're learning that, and it seems like it's too early to be messing with it in this way. Like maybe in the lab, just like, okay, let's see what happens if we do this, and kind of play around with it a little bit and say, oh, look, this goat grew legs coming out of its horn spot or something, But it just seems like there is so much unknown at this point that they're tinkering with individual genes because they think this gene does this. But they're finding out all the time that it's like, oh, this gene doesn't just do this, it also does this, this, and this. And it's responsible for all these kind of downstream effects. So I think they're really playing with fire. Like, I think they don't know what they're doing. That's basically my view on the entire biotechnology industry. Like, all the things that they're putting out there, they have no idea what they're doing.
Yet, if you were one of these top genetic researchers, I think that probably one of the ways that they know as little as they do know, which is still more than the average person, I think one of those ways is by just getting in the lab and just tinkering with stuff. And I'm pretty sure that they were doing this well before 2015, once this CRISPR technology burst on the scene. So yeah, there's probably labs all over the world where there's just scientists just taking genes out and putting genes in and just experimenting and then discovering by accident something.
Yeah.
Yeah, it tends to be the case with these kinds of things is that they become a little bit trigger happy and overexcited to get it to the public. Now it's like it's like vaccines, it'll go through the minimum amount of trials, human trials, and then they'll just get it onto the market. And it's like, this smells a bit like that, it has that kind of taste to it. It's like, oh, okay, so we have this amazing new technology, which we don't really know much about, and we're still experimenting with, but it could cure cystic fibrosis. So very soon we're going to get it on the market and it's going to cure all of these people. And it's like, well, when you present it like that, that's really cool. But as Doug said, when you like all of these genes and stuff, there's probably so many different functions of them that scientists don't even know yet. And also, we don't know the consequences of taking out a gene and then putting back in something else. Like, if you put something else, is it just the gene which is fulfilling a function, or is it that gene in conjunction with the entire system? Is it the gene's interaction with other things like other proteins and other kind of everything in the human body, like the whole information field, the system as a whole is like working in conjunction. And when you mess around with that real tight-knit system, how do you know that the mechanistic that just because it would make sense theoretically, how do you know that that's actually going to work in real life? Because real life isn't a lab experiment, right? And there's just millions and trillions of different interactions in real life, which you can't control for, when you can control for it in a lab, in a Petri dish. And human beings aren't Petri dishes. So it seems that there's so many potential things that aren't, well, maybe they are being considered. But the way that he just put that, I mean, it would be great if you could help someone with cystic fibrosis, but is it going to be as simple as just taking out a gene?
Well, like with vaccines, they always dangle that carrot of curing some diseases that human beings suffer from. And like vaccines and the disastrous repercussions that they've caused all over the world, it'll probably be the same thing with CRISPR technology. But, saying that it'll cure a bunch of diseases is how they actually get their funding, or they garner public support, because people will basically do almost anything to be healthy. Or, if you're suffering from some chronic disease, especially if it's a genetic disease and there's not much you can do for it, you'll hold out hope for almost anything.
Well, I think that's why they start with agriculture initially, so they can start tinkering. I mean, we've seen this with GMOs, they were introduced in 1996, I believe. And, that the whole kind of messy process of using a gene gun and blasting the genetics of the seed to fill it with Roundup or whatever. And now we're, 25 years in, and they're starting to find all of these issues with gut, reactions and, basic just wreaking havoc. And so I feel like, at least in the agriculture world, that's why a lot of people are calling this GMOs 2.0, because they're not using that kind of sloppy genetic modification. They're claiming time and again, and you can read the articles, they keep saying it's precise, it's precise, it's precise. And just like what Elliot was suggesting, I mean, how do you know if you don't have 30 years of experience on the effects? So in ag, they've started with like the apple. So they use that CRISPR-Cas9 technology to modify an apple so that it doesn't turn brown when you cut it open. And so you could package it and sell it, and it would not turn brown. I mean, would you want to eat an apple that doesn't turn brown but may still be going through the whole fermentation process? You just don't know it because you don't see it. And they've done the same with mushrooms too. And in the US, people are in the biotech world are supporting it because they're saying it will not need to be labeled. And even the USDA, Department of Agriculture, they're basically saying that these need no special regulations because they haven't actually inserted anything. They've just removed those unwanted aspects. It's like the browning of fruits and vegetables. But that to me is a huge red flag. If anyone's had food poisoning, they know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, so there's a picture of it, Damien just put up, of a conventional apple and then the Arctic apple.
What's so bad about the conventional apple? That looks perfectly fine to me.
Yeah.
It's a little brown.
Other apple that looks fake and phony.
That's one thing that I've noticed about all this gene editing, genetic modification kind of stuff, is that the problems that they seem to be trying to solve are really like not problems, or like they don't really seem like extreme problems to me. Like the idea of exactly that browning of the apple. I mean, we're going to get into the animal stuff later on, but specifically if you just look at that, the whole apple turning brown thing, I mean, is that really like, are people not buying apples because they turn brown? It's like, I was going to buy an apple because I really want an apple right now, but it's going to turn brown. So
people are outside of their grocery stores protesting brown apples.
Exactly.
Something has to be done. My apple's turning brown.
When will it end?
My suffering.
But I mean, you just see it again and again, like all the different things that they're coming up with. A lot of times it's kind of like, well, that's not helpful. That's not really doing anything that's you're not going to save humanity by having a non-browning apple. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things to look into about all this is who's funding this kind of research. And one of the biggest funders is DARPA. And for our listeners who may not know who they are, that's what the defense, what does it stand for? Basically, it's American Defense.
It stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're up to some pretty scary stuff, actually. The whole gene drive thing, which is basically, I don't know a lot about it, but it's essentially like a technology that's able to not only put new genetic material in, but spread it throughout the population kind of as quickly as possible. So it's almost like real-time modification of entire species as opposed to dealing with like kind of individuals. And they've got it at a point now where they say they can get genetic material to 99% of the population within 10 generations.
Yeah,
really
so
great.
they're actually not just modifying the individual, they're making sure their offspring has whatever
Yeah,
mutation or change they initiated,
yeah.
which is scary.
It's really scary, especially when you consider that it's DARPA doing it, and you know that they're not like, you know, trying to turn everybody into like X-Men or something like that. Like, you know that they're probably like looking at, well, if we wanted to take out a country as quickly as possible and all the citizens of that country, how could we do it? Aha, here's a way. Or something along those lines, you know, bio, some kind of plague or something like that. Like, you know that they're up to no good.
Well, the scientist that actually helped develop that gene drive that you're talking about, Doug, he was a Harvard biologist named Kevin Esvalent, and he publicly warned that the development of gene editing in conjunction with these gene drives has alarming potential to go awry. And he notes how often CRISPR messes up, and the likelihood of protective mutations arising, making even benign gene drives aggressive. And then he stresses just a few engineered organisms could irrevocably alter an entire ecosystem.
Yeah. Again, I just get the impression that they don't know what they're doing. It's like they don't
No.
they don't understand the consequences, or they don't care. I mean, that's the other possibility too.
Yeah. I mean, if you consider like all of the medications that have been produced over the last 75 years or so, and not one of them is side effect free. Yet
Yeah.
you still have the power as a consumer to stop taking that medication. Let's say you had your genes altered in some way. You can't go back in and unalter that gene
No.
and unalter the effects of those that it's caused.
No. It's true. And when you consider all the different things that can go wrong with CRISPR too. I mean, they keep on talking about how, oh, it's very precise, it's very accurate. But the fact of the matter is that stuff goes wrong with it all the time. All kinds of unintended things happen. You know, which is why there's still all this research happening on it and stuff. And you see all these papers with titles like Improving CRISPR-Cas9 Nuclease Specificity Using Truncated Guide RNAs. I just read that, by the way. I didn't just come up with that off the top of my head. But you know what I mean? Like, they're saying, oh, improving CRISPR and what we can do and how we can keep on working it, you know, tweaks and things like that. So, I mean, obviously it's not perfect. And there are lots of examples of where it has gone wrong. I just lost the thing that I was going to talk about. Anyway, it goes horribly wrong at points.
Well, I have a good kind of visual that I can share here. So before I do, there's a gentleman, Jonathan Latham, and he's written extensively about CRISPR technology and the myths that go along with it. And, you know, the number one myth that he addresses is that current genome editing technologies are not error prone. And so that's a big myth. And he basically, you know, scientifically explains it. I won't go into the scientific explanation, but you can read about it. And but the myth number two is that precision equals control. And he gives a really good description. He said, suppose a non-Chinese as a non-Chinese speaker, I were to precisely remove from a Chinese text one character, one line, or one page, I would have 100% precision, but zero control over the change in the meaning. Precision, therefore, is only as useful as the understanding that underlines it. And surely no DNA biologist would propose we understand DNA, or why else are we studying it?
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. That is a good point. And it's good to have somebody actually admit, like, no, we don't have a perfect understanding of DNA. So maybe it's like somebody who like has a little bit of experience with cars, and then like lifts up the hood and starts yanking wires out and stuff like that, and like connecting tubes to different places, and like what happens if I put water in this thing, or what happens if I put the gas in this other container instead of in the gas tank. It's just like they really have a very rudimentary understanding of this stuff, and they're just playing around. They're playing God. I think they're like, they're on an ego trip,
Yeah. There was a research study they did on these genetically blind mice, and they used the CRISPR-9 technology to cure the mouse's blindness. And they ran some tests afterward, and after the test, or after the procedure, they found that along with the gene that they edited for the blindness, there were 100 or more than 100 other deletions and insertions, and more than 1,500 nucleotide mutations.
Wow.
So just one little change, I'm sure they thought they were being ultra precise, like, yay, this mouse can see now. And of course, like with all these studies or articles and things that we read about these experiments, you only get a snapshot in time of what happened. There's never any follow-up, like 5 months later, these mice went on a rampage in the lab and shot up all the scientists or something. Or you never hear any follow-up about what happened with these experiments. It's just one little focus on that period of time, and that's all you get.
Well, the other thing, in that same article that Erica was talking about, by Jonathan Latham, the second myth that he addresses is that precision equals control. And so, I think this is a really important point, because he's saying that even if this was very precise, the fact that they don't understand it is one of the things that is leading to all these other things. So like he gives an example. He says, suppose as a non-Chinese speaker, I were to precisely remove from a Chinese text one character, one line, or one page. I would have 100% precision, but zero control over the change in meaning. Precision, therefore, is only as useful as the understanding that underlies it. And surely... Oh, you already read this, didn't you, Erica? Son of a... Sorry, guys. It's too bad we don't do any post-editing on that show. That's embarrassing. Sorry.
No, but I do think that's a really good example, because for those of us that are not like super science mind, you could fall into the rabbit hole of this technology. And like Tiffany was saying, you could think, oh, well, I could eliminate things in my family, or we could do all these great things with it. But like to read that just little description helps you get an idea. Like, sure, you can be precise with removing stuff, but again, it's those unintended consequences that happen.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
If you're, back to the agriculture thing, it's like, that's why I think they start with agriculture, especially in the US, because they can release it into the environment and basically find out what happens without having to do safety testing. They can just say, oh, it's totally safe. And how they really going to know what the unintended consequences are, Yeah. And I agree with you. I don't have a problem with guys tinkering in the lab, but once you use people as guinea pigs, then there's some problems for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the way that it gets sold to people is with all this amazing talk of the amazing things they're going to be able to do, all these diseases they'll be able to eliminate, end famine and feed the entire world on these crops and things like that, but those promises just never come to pass. It's really, most of the time, the things that they're doing is making it so that they can patent something and benefit from it in some way. It's really just like, and I mean, that's just kind of the way science works, right? It's kind of like you invest all this energy into getting something that's going to have a payout that you're going to get money off of, right? So you pursue a drug because the drug is going to eventually pay off. You're going to get it's going to be a blockbuster drug. Everybody's going to take it and you're going to get money from it. So that's where you invest. And it's the same thing with these genetically modified things. It's like, where is somewhere that in the future we can make money? So they go into getting a crop and they say, well, if we make this drought-resistant rice or whatever, or corn, whatever the case may be, that's going to sell like gangbusters. So yes, let's invest in that. But really all that ends up coming out of that is stuff that kind of benefits these biotech companies, not the general consumer. So what crops do we have? Ones that produce poison or are resistant to poison. And that's basically it. That's what we've got. So I can see the same thing happening when it comes to like gene editing people. It's kind of like, what's really going to pay off here? And yeah, sure, curing disease, that sort of thing, that'll help, but it'll probably be things like, choosing your eye color, your kid's IQ, like, I don't know, how attractive they are, those sorts of things. Not exactly things that are going to save the world.
It could also be, making super soldiers, that kind of stuff. You could have military babies, whereby they're growing embryos and they've got like the top physical characteristics and everything. But even then, I mean, with gene editing, is it going to be possible to make a human being which is not, which is invincible? I don't think so. I don't think that gene editing is capable of doing that, because I think there is a finite capacity for what human beings are capable of. We came into this world the way that we are for certain reasons, I think, and there are kind of natural laws to that. Unless you want to get into robotic arms and stuff, then you might be able to make, some tall and muscular military type kind of babies. Well, yeah, adults. But at the end of the day, no, go ahead.
No, finish your thought.
I was going to say, at the end of the day, I mean, it's not going to change much, I don't think.
And I think that's true. I think that what we know about the genome right now, like what we know about genes, it's kind of like we know that they make proteins. So, I mean, it's kind of like our view on what DNA is and what it can do is already pretty limited. And I mean, there's only so much you can do by changing proteins around. So, I mean, yeah, you can find the genetic thing that might make somebody more predisposed to be taller or something like that, but it's not necessarily going to manifest in that way. And I guess what I'm saying is that it's kind of like changing the blueprint can only, like, you're limited in how much that will actually change the final result, if that makes sense.
But I think that's why DARPA's involved. I think what you're talking about, Elliot, is what they want.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why the main funder of it is the Pentagon, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure there are plenty of extreme biohackers out there who would wish to genetically alter themselves so they can become like Supermen and perhaps, pass those traits onto their offspring. But I think just in general, the whole idea of genetically modifying or bioengineering some things it's just extreme cases of wishful thinking, like whether you want to become an X-Man or if you want to cure every disease known to man or make the perfect apple or whatever. All of it is wishful thinking. Oh my God, look at that.
Yeah.
I like meat, but I don't know if I could do that.
So that's the gene-edited cow, right?
Yeah.
The hornless cattle, Holstein, the hornless Holstein.
Well, the thing about the Holstein cattle is they can just do selective breeding to get rid of the horns on cattle. You don't have to actually go into the genetic blueprint and tinker with it in order to do that.
Exactly. It's like, why? That's again, coming back to the whole thing about, are they really doing anything that useful? I think that they picked that maybe because they thought it would be easy or something, and then when really there's zero demand for it. It's like, no, we can do it through breeding.
There's these too.
Glowing fish.
It's a cat somewhere as well.
Wow.
Or muscular beagles. I guess beagles are used in a lot of labs for research, and somebody thought it would be a good idea to make Herculean beagles with a lot of muscle tone.
That's crazy.
But I guess, there's a certain amount of animal experimentation that people will accept. And as long as the animal doesn't come out looking extremely deformed or ugly, then people won't be up in arms. But then when you get to human beings, it's a different story. So I guess this would be a good time to talk about, what's his name? He Jiankui.
Yeah.
The Chinese researcher who thought it was a good idea to conduct a secret research experiment in which he altered the genetics of a pregnant woman, and she gave birth to twins. His whole idea was to make sure that the babies that were born were resistant to acquiring HIV. So in this case, the mother was HIV negative, the father was HIV positive. And I don't know if he knew this or he just failed to take it into account. If your father has HIV, the chances of him transmitting it to the child is very low versus if the mother has HIV. And also, I think the gene that he was going for was at the CCR5. He said if he blocked that gene, then that will make the babies HIV resistant. But HIV is not only dependent on CCR5 activation. There's actually other genes that can cause, susceptibility to HIV. So again, he was fighting against something that he didn't really need to.
Yeah. Again. It's just crazy. Like again, it's a situation where nobody's asking for this, especially like when he actually did this, like there was a lot of blowback from the scientific community who were saying that, what you've done is extremely irresponsible. I mean, there's so many phases that this should go through before you get to the point where you're doing it on babies or humans, And apparently, like scientists were saying, it wasn't even good work. It was very sloppy. That the gene wasn't picked up in all the places that it should have been within the twins. I think one of them is heterozygous and the other one is homozygous. And yeah, it seems like this guy, again, just kind of on a power trip, wanted to be the first to do it and just pushed it through regardless of the consequences.
And again, I look for follow-up on those twin girls, Lulu and Nana, I think were their pseudonyms, and you can't find anything. The only follow-up I found on the story was that the researcher ended up getting fired from his university post.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, he says he's going to be following them until they're 18. But the thing is, like, how do you even know that it's successful? If these twins actually are resistant to HIV, they would then have to be, like, purposely have sex with somebody with HIV to prove that it actually worked. It's kind of like one of these experiments where you can't actually know that it worked.
Right.
There's no way to know. And if he's only following them till they're 18, it's kind of like, well, I mean, I know kids, it's getting younger and younger at which they can start having sex, but I'm thinking in China, maybe 18 is, I don't know, actually. I don't know anything about China.
Well, I think it's more of an introducing the concept to people to see how they react to it. You know what I mean? Like, I know in a previous show, we've talked about it, like, why did he do it? And, you know, maybe it was completely intentional to kind of leak it and make him the guy that does it, and just to see the ethical concerns that came up, or, you know what I mean? To just kind of gauge the response that people have. Are people going to be outraged? Are they going to be interested, you know? Because you see them doing this with these animals. I mean, Damien showed the cow, but they're also genetically modifying goats so they can have more cashmere-like hair. You know, what's the one, the muscly pigs, you know, where they make a pig that's more muscly. And one of the things, and I'm just going by memory of reading the article here, was that they didn't bother to consider the fact that these super muscly pigs might not have the specific bone structure to carry that much weight or enough skin, or, you know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, when they do this stuff on animals, you just know that humans are somewhere in the background. They're just not talking about it. They're you know, they can make, like Elliot said, a super muscly soldier, you know what I mean? Like, let's start with a pig, because a pig is, you know, a good place to start, I guess. I don't know. But they don't take into consideration all the other elements that it would take to just keep that muscly pig alive. And I think in some of the research they've done, like 95% of them died anyway.
Oh, God.
Well, there was a human being who actually died in one of these genetic trials. His name was Jesse Gelsinger, and this happened like back in 1999 or sometime. So I'm not sure exactly what kind of technology they were using at that time, but he had this disorder called ornithine transcarbamylase deficiency. It's rare, and it's some kind of disease where you can't eat high protein. So he was subsisting on a low protein diet, and he was taking like 32 pills a day for medication. So I think University of Pennsylvania researchers wanted to test this treatment they had for babies, because this disorder can be fatal. So he volunteered for it. He was a teenager at the time. He knew that it didn't hold out any hope for him, but he thought, okay, it's for the baby, so I'll go ahead and do it. So they injected him with some corrected genes that were like covered in weakened cold virus, and he basically had multiple organ failure, and he died.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before. That's funny.
Yeah.
Are those pictures real? Sorry to change. Damien just put some pictures up, and that just doesn't even look real. Go back to that.
Yeah.
That just looks like something out of some
hellhound, a DARPA hellhound. Can you imagine that thing chasing you down the street in the future dystopia?
That's okay, because you'll be super muscly too.
Yeah, you'll have super speed, and you'll shoot lightning bolts out of your hands.
I'm sorry, Tiffany. I didn't mean to interrupt. I know.
Anyway, well, that was the story. So this kid, you know, and his family, I'm sure, thought that he was doing something great for humanity and helping the babies, and he ended up dying, and we still don't have a cure for that carboxylase disorder.
Wow. Well, I guess that's the question, right? Like, I don't know. You know, would you do it, Gene? No. Okay. Maybe put the question slightly differently. So, say you had a child who had a rare genetic condition, and they had some sort of therapy with the CRISPR, like some ability to kind of replace that gene and cure the disease.
Well, I can imagine the draw, and no parent wants their child to suffer, but absolutely not. I would venture
Really?
even to say, hell no,
Really?
no,
Wow, you feel
no,
that strongly about it. That's
yes.
interesting. See, I
I
think.
I share that sentiment. I do.
Okay. Elliot, what do you think?
Probably would agree with Eric and Tiff.
Wow, you guys are all hardcore. See, I
You
think
go for it, Doug?
I think that I probably would. I mean, given where the technology is right now, yeah, it's risky because it seems like what they've done. The problems with CRISPR have obviously not been worked out. I don't know if they ever will be worked out. It seems like, despite the fact that they're saying it's quite precise, it really isn't, and it could lead to other downstream effects. But I think that if I had a child that was suffering, I would probably lean in the direction of let's give it a go. I don't know.
Even, are you saying like in some future perfect world where the methods are perfected? Or are you saying now?
Yeah, probably not. Probably not now, because I don't think. Yeah, the things obviously haven't been perfected. See, I mean, I guess
changes the whole question.
Okay. I was originally saying now, but now I'm changing it. But anyway, I guess the other thing is it does kind of get into a moral question with it, right? Like it really is kind of like playing God. When you're talking about, traditional breeding methods with plants and with animals and things like that, there's clearly a line that's not being crossed there. You're not going into the DNA and tinkering around and fiddling with things and making changes. So, yeah, I guess there is that line. But if they actually get it perfected and they can do it, I don't know. I think using it for the right reasons, like actually curing disease, I might be for that.
I would even go as far as to say, I don't think that a human being could ever know everything there is to know about the human body. I think that you would have to be a God level creator in order to do that. So I'm not really holding out any hope that that kind of knowledge will ever be acquired. I mean, it'll probably be fun to see how much you can know, but I don't think that humans can actually know all of that. I'm okay with that, though.
Now, okay, I think I've been drawn along to Doug's way of thinking. Because I've been thinking about this. Actually, I'd have stem cell therapy, right? And stem cell therapy it's pretty crazy when you look at what they do. I mean, you're not like changing the DNA, but you are you're along the similar lines, It's very much tinkering with things that human beings have never really been able to do, but it seems to work quite well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
But I think that's much different, though, than actually going into the genome and messing around with the complete blueprint for life.
So
I'd try stem cells, but not gene therapy.
Is it because of a fear of something going wrong, or is it more that that's kind of like God's territory and you don't mess with that?
It's more of a fear of the unintended consequences. And secondarily, that's God's territory. But mostly it's just my own personal fear.
Right. Fair enough. Fair enough. I think maybe with more research, if they actually do get a way that is actually precise, and they know that when they want to tinker with this one gene, that's the only gene that's going to get tinkered with, and they know that this one genetic mutation is what is causing some kind of disease or disorder that is causing a great deal of suffering, I'm okay with them doing that. That's a lot of ifs, mind you. But I guess what I'm saying is that, I mean, it's kind of like my feelings on vaccines as well, as in principle, I'm not opposed to them, right? It's just that the way that they are, as they currently exist is a total shit show, and
Yeah.
they're causing all kinds of problems. I guess I kind of feel the same way about this technology, is that it's a mess right now, and they don't know what they're doing, and they're making all kinds of mistakes. And yeah, but if they ever get to a point where it is actually possible to do this successfully, then yeah, I don't know that I necessarily have a problem with it.
Yeah, it's one of those ideas that are great on paper, but in reality, it's crap.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just looking on Amazon. There is a DIY bacterial genome engineering CRISPR kit on sale for $170.
What does it do? Like, what's the idea? What, you can edit your own genome? Is that what it is?
Well, it sounds like it's for just bacteria,
Oh,
but I don't know. If you get a mad enough scientist in a lab, who knows what they can do with this certain bacteria, and will they unleash it on the public? Who knows? But it's only $170 as a steal. So if anybody wants to experiment,
Is there any reviews? Has anyone tried it?
yeah, there's 3 reviews and they're all 5-star.
wow.
Science made easy.
Oh my God, it's like one of those little home science kits you would get when you were a kid. It came with like a little microscope and a bunch of different
So
chemicals.
if we want to contribute our knowledge to the genetic engineering pool, I think we should start with that.
Wow. That's actually kind of terrifying when you think about it. It's like everybody's all up in arms about this guy editing babies, but it's like we're right around the corner from everybody doing that at home. Make sure
That's
your
why I
baby
think
has a big
they
brain.
let it come out. They wanted to see people's ideas on it. They wanted to see, and then this company just decided to sell their kit on Amazon. They were waiting for the moment to release it.
It could be that they were just trying to shift the Overton window a bit, like actually shift people's, not necessarily gauge the perception, but kind of like put it out there to make it, like to start the process of people becoming more accepting of it.
Well, if you can tinker around with DNA, even if it's just on bacteria in your basement for $170, just imagine what people like Bill Gates, who have billions of dollars, can do. And he actually is trying to do. He's really big on genetic engineering and genetically modified mosquitoes. Yeah, so his Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation have been funding a whole lot of DNA research. So one can only imagine what those people are up to with all that money behind them.
Yeah, he's a strong supporter of it all, of CRISPR technology.
Yeah. Well, because he probably just looks at it like computer code. It's like he was able to build Windows, so he should be able to modify people.
Build Windows and humans.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he was... Oh, go on, Doug.
No, I was just going to say for sure he's got like some X-Men like down in his basement or something like that. Like genetically modified people with superpowers.
Allegedly has X-Men in his basement.
Allegedly.
Well, he actually wrote in a magazine on the New York Council on Foreign Relations, shocking, called Foreign Affairs, that he argues that CRISPR and other gene editing techniques should be used globally to meet the growing demand for food and improve disease prevention, particularly malaria, which is where, Tiffany's GMO mosquitoes come in. He says it would be a tragedy to pass up this opportunity. And also, he's very involved with spreading GMO plants, but into African agriculture. And guess who's right there up there with them? Monsanto and Bayer Ag. So these three are just, they've financed gene editing projects. And I don't know, I just don't trust them.
I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't trust them either.
Problem is that like or it seems this way anyway. I could be wrong, but it seems that every species, every kind of different genre and family of animal in nature kind of operates in this symbiotic relationship. They all have their individual roles, and that when you insert or remove one of these species, or you alter one of these species, then that has downstream unforeseeable effects on the entire ecosystem, right? So if you take out the predators in an ecosystem, then actually you get an overgrowth of other species which would be eaten by the predators, and then eventually everything dies because it's like everything relies on everything else. And with these GM mosquitoes, like there are scientists who have been criticizing this and basically have said that, okay, if you guys let these GM mosquitoes out in the wild, and this is going to have like downstream effects on other mosquitoes. So they're talking about how by reducing one mosquito species, what you're potentially going to be doing is increase the number of other species, which are actually disease-carrying species. So these specific ones, let me find it. Where is it? Basically, this article is talking about how there's a company, Oxitec, and so they denied releasing millions of genetically engineered a certain type of mosquito, which I can't pronounce the name of, Aedes aegypti or something. But their aim was suppressing wild mosquito numbers. But unfortunately, if you were to do this, then they're basically saying that other species which carry things like dengue fever and Zika virus and something called chikungunya, that this is potentially going to happen. And so what you may find is that by releasing a bunch of these so-called benign species, you may actually end up producing a situation which is 10 times worse than what we're currently in. And you can't foresee what is exactly going to happen when you do something like that. And it's completely irresponsible.
Well, they said that they did release a bunch of GM mosquitoes in the Cayman Islands. And they came out, this was in November 2018. They came out and said, oh yeah, it didn't work. Like that's what what they were trying to do did not work. And as far as I know, there wasn't a heck of a lot of information that actually went out. I mean, what didn't work and exactly
how didn't it work?
Yeah, how didn't it work? But apparently they just were like, yeah, it didn't work, so we're not going to do it again.
Yeah, didn't the governor of the Cayman Islands say, yeah, it didn't work, and that's all I'm going to say about that?
Yeah.
He was pretty tight-lipped about the whole thing, so it makes me wonder, like, what happened that we don't know about?
It's those unintended consequences that they don't want to talk about.
Yeah.
And they do it even when the population doesn't want them to do it. Like in Florida, they wanted to release those genetically modified mosquitoes, and was over 140,000 people signed a petition against it. Nobody wants this stuff, but they keep pushing it.
Yeah.
If somebody wants to get dengue fever, that's their choice.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it reminds me, it's just like they don't have, like Elliot was saying, they don't have a clear idea of what the consequences are of these actions. Like it's almost like they just kind of brainstorm these ideas and then they just kind of go with one. And it really, if you really kind of examine it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It reminds me of the guys who are trying to dim the sun by like putting like aerosols into the atmosphere to dim the sun to stop global warming. I mean, like, how stupid is that? It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Like, but apparently they're actually like experimenting with it and trying to go ahead with it. It's the same kind of thing with all these GMOs. Like, oh, we'll just put these genetically modified mosquitoes out there, and that'll take care of this problem. Like, it's just, I don't know. It's almost like they don't have the ability to think hard about this stuff.
Another good example is this idea of Franken bees, or this genetically modified pollinators. Um, and I won't go super into the whole thing, but I think everyone is kind of aware that the bees are dying off, whether it's colony collapse disorder or the virolomite, or there's been a major concern about bee die-offs around the world, not just in the U.S. or the Europe, but the same kind of thing that you're saying, Doug. Like, well, we'll just genetically modify the bee, or use this gene drives, or use these gene editing technology, so that we can make a super bee that will be resistant to neonicotinoids. And it's, and this was in The Guardian recently. It was called Invasion of the Franken Bee. And, it's a pretty long article, but, they have apiary people that, I think they're called apiaries, people that are beekeepers. And then you have, these scientists that are working on mapping the genome of a bee, and it's one of the most studied insects in the whole insect kingdom. But even the Beye was his name, Beye, the man that was working on the research, said this is like the stupidest idea ever. The world doesn't need chemical resistant bees, he says. It needs farming practices that don't harm us. So my point being in all that is that instead of genetically messing with the bee so it can tolerate pesticides, like, deal with the issue and stop using all these terrible pesticides. You know what I mean? So it's almost like, let's just introduce something that's even more crazy and could have major potential blowback when you consider they pollinate. I mean, I can't remember the amount, but it's like almost every food that you eat. Sorry, that was my dog wasn't happy with that either. But they're major pollinators. They're responsible for just so much of, as Elliot was saying, the whole foundation of life on the planet, and people are able to eat. You know what I mean?
Well, if you think that you have the power to alter the very foundation of life on the planet, then screwing them around with a few billion bees, I mean, that's pretty much nothing to you. You got it all together. You know what you're doing.
It's like they're so resistant to kind of pull back and take a look at the direction that things are going in and saying, you know what, we need a course correction here. It's like they keep on trying to stick Band-Aids on things instead of actually like healing the problem. It's the same thing with the EnviroPig was another one. That was one of the first experiments they did with genetically modifying animals. And they were basically, so they looked at the problem of factory farms, the waste that comes out of that. There was too much nitrogen in the fecal matter of the pigs, and that was causing all these like algae blooms and environmental problems to the surrounding land. So instead of saying, okay, well, maybe factory farming is a bad idea because we've got all this pollution coming from it, they're like, I know, let's genetically modify the pigs so that they don't produce as much nitrogen. And that's what that was their solution to the problem. It's kind of like, well, no, I mean, factory farming is the problem. So let's move away from that. No, don't worry. We're going to genetically modify our pigs so that it'll be perfect. There'll be no problems.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's why, back to what I support Tiffany in that thing with the I'm skeptical for sure, because it's like, oh, here's a solution, and maybe it's not a solution.
Yeah. Maybe I have to reconsider because I don't know. I still think. Yeah, I think that. Well, I don't know. Maybe not.
You're still holding out hope, Doug.
Well, it's just kind of like, with the factory farming example and the EnviroPigs and with the bees and stuff like that, I can see that the folly of those answers, that they aren't really good answers. They're actually really terrible answers, and they aren't really recognizing the nature of the problem. Whereas when you're talking about with a disease that is caused by a genetic mutation and you have ability to correct that mutation, maybe I'm just short-sighted and I don't see the problem, and I would just be one of those scientists pushing through a non-solution that's going to cause more problems. But to me, it seems like it seems like a different thing to me, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
But I think that with all of the red flags and the warnings.
Did we lose Tiff? Did we lose everybody?
Who want to research this and they have the funding to do it are going to keep doing it. And, we might end up with 1 million human monkey chimeras or monkeys with human brain matter that are smarter, so they say. But I think it's going to continue to go on, and I don't know if there's much that we can do to stop it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It might go underground, and then ta-da, you stumble upon an underground bunker holding 5,000 genetically modified human beings.
Yeah. X-Men.
Yeah, and then after that, we'll be left to deal with the aftermath on how to deal with these beings.
Yeah. Well, I can definitely see a future where this kind of stuff gets offered up as commercial things for people to either edit their own genome or edit their baby's genome in some way, whether it just be kind of picking out traits that they want, or, it'll probably come at first with, we will check to see if there's any genetic disorders that can be corrected, like diseases or things like that, and we'll correct those. But then it'll get to the point where it's kind of like you can choose hair color, eye color, height, measurements, the whole bit.
Yeah.
I can see that future coming quite soon, actually. Within my lifetime, I would expect.
Well, especially, and not to go into a whole nother random topic, but even just in the technology of in vitro fertilization and how it's developed over the last 10 years or so, that people who could never have a child now can have a child because of technology. So
That's a good point.
Well, I know we probably didn't get into all the different facets, and it seems like by the week there's new animals and different editing that's coming out, and try and stay up to date on it as possible. But I think on a little bit lighter note, we do have a pet health segment about pet hedgehogs.
Hedgehogs.
That's the one.
Here we go.
Hello, and welcome to the Pet Health segment of the Objective Health program. This time I would like to share with you information about the cutest prickly creature, the hedgehog. The video offers advice if you would like to get a hedgehog as a pet, but it also contains a lot of other information you may find interesting. And there is actually hedgehog there walking around, so cuteness. And don't forget to stay until the end and see even more cuteness. Have a good one, everyone. Bye.
Hedgehogs have been living in the wild in Africa for centuries, but only recently have been kept as pets. They can make terrific pets when cared for appropriately, and their popularity does appear to be increasing. Hedgehogs can be adorable, loving pets if they're handled often and made less fearful of people. They can learn to recognize and bond closely with their owners. But hedgehogs are not meant for everyone. Before you consider bringing a hedgehog home, there are several things about this unique creature you should be aware of. First, hedgehogs are covered in prickly quills. Like porcupines, the skin over the hedgehog's back is covered with prickly sharp spines that help protect them from predators. But unlike porcupines, however, hedgehogs' quills do not shoot out in defense. When handled, hedgehogs will twitch and jump so that the quills poke out. So handling a nervous hedgehog can be very tricky and may require holding it in a small towel until it relaxes. As with all other pets, hedgehog owners should be sure to thoroughly wash their hands after handling their pets, as all hedgehogs potentially carry salmonella bacteria that can cause illness in people. Second, hedgehogs curl up when they feel threatened. As a defense mechanism, hedgehogs are able to roll their bodies into tight balls, causing their spines to point outwards. Strong muscles over their backs contract forcibly to enable them to do this. It's nearly impossible to unfurl a hedgehog once it's curled up tightly. Hedgehogs must be handled often to get them to relax and uncurl. Unsocialized hedgehogs that are never handled, however, may remain nervous and tightly curled up all the time. Third, hedgehogs have a very unique way of exploring their environment called self-anointing. When a hedgehog encounters an object with a new scent, it will lick and bite the object and form a frothy spitball in its mouth containing that new scent. They then throw their heads back and spit this frothy saliva over their spines with their tongues to camouflage themselves with the new scent and to make themselves less obvious to predators. Fourth, hedgehogs are insectivores, not rodents. They're not strict insectivores, however, as they consume a variety of different types of food in the wild. Pet hedgehogs eat mealworms, crickets, earthworms, waxworms, and a larger portion of their diet made of commercially available pelleted formulas manufactured for hedgehogs. They can also eat a small amount of vegetables, fruit, and cooked meat. Given their desire to catch live prey, pet hedgehogs should not be given large numbers of insects, or they'll likely eat those to the exclusion of the other foods. Hedgehogs love to eat, and if they're housed in cages with little opportunity to get out and exercise, they are very likely to become obese. They should be given time out of their cages and encouraged to run on wheels to help them prevent weight gain. Finally, hedgehogs are nocturnal. Wild hedgehogs are active at night when their food is available. Pet hedgehogs have maintained this nocturnal lifestyle, sleeping much of the day and running in wheels at night. So if you're a light sleeper, or you go to bed early, or you stay out late, a hedgehog may not be the best pet for you. So, if you're thinking of having a hedgehog, realize that these little prickly pets need time, attention, and care to thrive and interact.
That was very cute.
That was.
I can't wait until we're genetically modifying our pets so they're even more cute. Take out all their unwanted behaviors and human
What
brains.
if you could genetically modify your pets to talk?
There you go. I'm not
I
sure I'd
couldn't
want to hear what they say.
understand the birds, though.
They're gonna find the cuteness gene soon.
Probably. Yeah.
And then you can have like
Everyone will have a cute pet.
yeah, even like cute snakes.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for watching and listening. And please like our video and subscribe if you're interested in all the new topics that we come up with. And we hope to have another interesting topic on our next show. And thank you to my co-hosts and Damien for doing all the wonderful pictures that makes our conversation lively.
No problem.
So we'll see you all again. Have a great day.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye bye.
See you.